Click the links to join my channel here over at Subscribe. Check out the Rumble and Odyssey. They mirror this, and plus there's other stuff up there because YouTube is very censorious these days. And no, the new CEO is not gonna. Things are gonna be even worse with the new CEO. He had some public statements that he was talking about his view of YouTube and people in their basements, and he just wanted like a corporate CNN type of YouTube. So he's probably going to be even worse than the old whoever Susan before him. So, The Lord of the Rings. Warner Brothers Discovery is currently working on an adaptation of the story of Helm Hammerhand titled Lord of the Rings, War of the Rohirrim. Anime-inspired film adapts the story Tolkien included in the appendices of The Lord of the Rings. First of all, no, that little spark of hope, drown it in an ocean of despair. You should be ashamed of yourself if you have any hope whatsoever. This is Hollywood. Abandon all hope, ye who enter here. Zaslaw is not going to be any different. You can get that thought out of your head. They're coming out with a new Batman and Superman movie 2025. So what? It doesn't matter. I shouldn't even say despair because I mean, it's those are the same coin, opposite sides. Like for Hollywood, you shouldn't be feeling anything about this. Like you have these old movies made about 20 years ago, and anything that's recent, you can just forget about it. I look at Lord of the Rings, that trilogy. In my mind, I think those are the last great movies to come out of Hollywood, and that was, I think, about 20 years ago. So Hollywood is a machine, but it's got this public face that you see, and under the skin is its true face, and it's satanic. Yeah, it turns out that the fire-breathing Christians circa the 80s were right about a lot of stuff. Maybe they were a little too much theater, but they were absolutely right about the slippery slope Hollywood was pushing. And the funny thing you think about, I don't know if you remember the 80s, Tipper Gore and the PMRC, and that was, Al Gore's, that was the left-wing position at the time, trying to get the degeneracy away from kids, from the Hollywood music media machine, and like that was not that long ago. And you think how fast the window has changed. Where now you have little kids singing, I don't know, Nicki Minaj songs and Cardi B songs about you know. So, what is Lord of the Rings and what are they doing to it? Well, briefly, the main story was the three books, the Lord of the Rings story. There was an earlier book called The Hobbit that was geared for a little younger audience. Then later books that followed, they had short stories and world build. Like a lot of the books are kind of heavy into world building. I think you kind of had to be more of a fan to get into that. But everyone is most familiar with the three Lord of the Rings main books, and they were made into films under Peter Jackson, which were hugely successful. And they were as accurate as you could do within the movie limits of a movie that is not too long. They had to be, you can't make a 5 hour movie, and that just doesn't work for theaters. So the 3 hour movies, they were solid, but no, you're not going to be able to include everything in there. So you got the books and the Jackson movies, which brings us up to Amazon later getting the rights to do Rings of Power. The rights alone cost $250 million. And the production costs about $500 million. And then they filmed season one. But now they think about it, because they had the Wu flu, it caused delays on the filming. So that $500 million is probably going to balloon up a little bit because they're expecting an earlier return on investment. So it's probably going to be pretty, I mean, it's already expensive, but it's probably going to be even more expensive at the end of it. So season two is going to be 2 years away, which doesn't matter because the first season bombed. I guess it was supposed to be a Silmarillion setting, except that they swapped out the European-based characters for non, and the story doesn't make any sense after that. I mean, you're looking at this story and like, what's going on here? Well, if you ask that on social media, you see the response you get. So, dear Hollywood, people hate Hollywood's version of diversity. Stick to the original story. We don't want cultural Bolshevik propaganda because we value the original European-based story. The question is why Hollywood doesn't value it, and obviously that's a bigger issue. So if they want to tell a story with people from all over the world, this potpourri type of thing, why subvert and corrupt a European one? Why don't you just write something new? Because if Amazon creates something from scratch, but loosely based on European mythology, set in a fictional world, but for some reason the tribes are full of people with different morphology, the audience, I'm assuming, would not be on board with it. They would ask the simple, obvious questions. So you got all these people. They look different, because you're using human actors. Obviously, the only suspension of disbelief only goes so far. So you got these different human actors from all over the world. Like you threw a net out in downtown LA somewhere and got all these people. So how are they together? And you're saying they're a tribe, but they're all together. You gonna explain that to me? No, we're not going to explain that, but you're obviously istophobic for asking. Okay, fine, fine. Well, for the sake of argument, we'll accept that and move on. But again, how do you explain that? It's like, oh, there is no explanation. Oh, but you know that the verisimilitude, the suspension of disbelief. Yeah, yeah, we just don't worry about it. Okay, but the stuff's not it's not really selling. You're not finding an audience. Again, you're istophobic. Yeah, but that I mean, you can say that all you want, and they will. They definitely will. And you can have your little minions on Twitter call anyone who criticizes the show istophobic, but it doesn't get butts in seats. In fact, if the Twitter kids, commie kids who are arguing about it, touch grass, yikes, my guy, are not supporting the show either. They're arguing about it. They love to argue with the Chad Hugo boss on Twitter, but neither side is watching the show. I mean, they probably saw the first couple episodes to see how bad it was, but like the numbers just aren't there, or they're there in the beginning, and then it's a straight line because people will watch anything the first show, and then it just kind of drops after that. So they're not going to explain why you have a tribe of people that look physically different. If they built a show from scratch, it would be obvious propaganda. People would see it for what it was. So they use this bait and switch detrimental reliance model where they're using the name that you're familiar with from, I don't know, how old's the story? 80 years from the original notes taken on The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, for the recognition of like such probably the best known fantasy story ever told. Then after you start watching, you see the subversion and you dip out, which is what happened. But I suppose they're hoping to pick up a new audience. I mean, they've done this. They do this in movies and with comics and with whatever else. They've always done this kind of stuff. It's like, well, was it the famous Leslie Headland quote that just sticks with me? I think she works at Disney, and she's talking about doing that, like diversifying the heck out of these shows and swapping out characters. And she goes, "We're leaving money on the table if we don't do this." And you know she's lying, and she knows she's lying. Everyone knows she's lying. Nobody believes her. And what happens? Well, they make these movies and they lose money. So Leslie Headland, your theory was you're leaving money on the table because I guess your theory is you're going to maintain the old audience, but you're also going to accumulate a new audience. But that hasn't worked out. You've actually lost the old audience and you failed to get a new audience. Are you going to readjust your theory? And they just will call you istophobic. And that's that. Because a lot of these companies, Disney, Amazon, Warner Brothers, Netflix, they have serious amounts of money to burn, and this is a religion to them. It's not a business. So they're hoping to pick up this new audience where it's a situation that people love the name recognition of Lord of the Rings, but simultaneously hate Lord of the Rings, Tolkien, and Europeans. Yeah, the whole thing is insane. Hollywood is a bunch of insane globalists who hate you and will subvert and corrupt anything European because they hate them also. It's part of the humiliation ritual, and they really can't create. Think about it. There is no story universe that has verisimilitude where different tribes from different evolutionary environments live together. That's not the human experience, which begs the question, why is this Hollywood propaganda machine pushing this so hard? Why are they pushing something that is not in accord with the human experience, that people don't want, and is not a commercial success? Those are all good questions. And then if you ask them, they'll just attack you on social media. They like if they couldn't deflect ad hominem and straw man, they wouldn't be able to engage. They just go, you're not respecting the artist's original tale. And they go, oh, we're updating it for a modern audience. But Tolkien was a master storyteller. I mean, that's the reason you bought the story. You're not master storytellers. If you want to tell this, diverse abomination stories, why don't you just write something yourself, write something new? They know all this. Like, they don't have an argument. You have the better argument. They don't have an argument. The true answer is like, well, we're cultural Bolsheviks. We're subverting and corrupting everything we touch. Oh, why don't you just come out and say that? Because that would be a bit of honesty. Anyway, so Rings of Power did not make sense. It found some viewers, but it didn't find fans. What I mean by this is, yes, some people cringe watch the first few episodes and slowly abandon it because it was just too ridiculous. You had hobbits from different parts of the world, and they were put together in the same tribe, and nobody explains why these two radically different groups are together. And if you ask on social media, you don't get an answer. You just get ad hominems because they don't have the answer. The whole thing is peak Hollywood bullshit brainwashing. They want kids to see it and think that this abomination is Lord of the Rings because nobody reads anymore. And everyone's on a phone and a tablet. They tried for a minute to make Lord of the Rings a thing, but it can't come from the top down. It's got to come from the bottom up, and it didn't. People watch it out of curiosity, but nobody got on board the show and became a fan of it. People weren't building memes around the show. There weren't message boards dedicated to the show. There wasn't the energy behind the show that there should have been. And the next season comes out in probably 2 years, so they'll have a second chance to start over if they wanted to, but they're not going to. There's zero chance of that happening. They would need to fire the wrong cast and hire the right people, the people who fit the expectations from the book. Of course, they're not going to do that. I mean, all that is said very carefully, but you know what I'm talking about. So the whole thing is pointless. 2 years from now, season 2 will just be the same girl power anti-Euro piece of propaganda. It'll fail even harder in season 2, and they're supposed to go for 5 seasons, and they probably will because Amazon really does have the money to burn, and they want this in their library, even if it's just as a space filler. If they cancel it after 3 seasons, it would be too much of an L for Amazon, but it would also be an L for the left wing in general, and the Twitter kids would be mad that I don't know, they excuse everything, they excuse every failure, and they blame it on the Chad Hugo bosses who weren't watching the show. It's like, was it Elizabeth Banks with Charlie's Angels? She keeps coming out and talking about Charlie's Angels every interview because she did the Bolivian marching powder bear story that came out, and then she like went back to talking about how that latest bomb, that was the Charlie's Angels bomb, because it's a huge bomb, and the bear movie she just did is probably going to be a little bit of a success. And she keeps blaming it on the marketing. It's like, oh, it was marketed towards women, and we told men not to come to the show. And it's like, I think you said that in an interview, but you're blaming the marketing. None of that makes sense. But the left wing just keeps insisting that people have to see these movies because it's some kind of political statement. Because they know these aren't just movies. They know everything is connected. It's all this one same spider web of these interconnected little pieces of propaganda, and when their movies fail, it's an L for them. And they've had a string of Hollywood failures lately. Charlie's Angels, Rings of Power. You've probably saw it with Willows, or with what's the Witcher with Henry Cavill. They did a prequel with blood blood orgy, blood origin, blood orchid, or something like that. And it's all it's all just a bunch of woke nonsense, and that failed too. So if Rings of Power came out and it's like, oh, we went 3 seasons and we canceled it, and we're down $400 million, they would just rather continue it and just lose more money. It's just not an issue for them because they know that these aren't shows; these are propaganda. And the sooner people I don't need to see your toenails. The sooner people recognize that, the better. Now, with Warner Brothers, with Zaslav, who's got rights to some stories, you can begin your analysis with a binary. Is the story going to try to be as close to Tolkien's origin story as possible? Will it be a curative approach or a Bolshevik transformative approach? Well, I regret to inform you, judging by the recent history of Hollywood, you're not going to get a return to the Peter Jackson curative approach. It's just not going to happen, because if it did, it would signal a tectonic shift in this globalist Hollywood foundation. It would signify that the pendulum was swinging back. I really, really doubt that's going to happen. There's not going to be a change coming from mainstream Hollywood. It's going to, if you want to make your own movies, and it's not going to come from Shapiro's Daily Wire, but I don't know how much Hollywood will have to lose before they turn around. I suspect that they will willingly lose all. Like, you're not going to see Hollywood turn around. You're going to see if people want to use that form of making 90-minute video presentations called movies. Oh man, it's not going to come from Amazon. It's not going to come from the big companies. It's going to have to come from outside those. So maybe lower budget films. Like, they're really not going to turn it around. They would rather burn the companies. Well, something like Amazon can subsidize, like literally subsidize, a losing branch of their film studios all they want. That's how much money Amazon has. But Netflix, Warner Brothers are slightly different. Maybe they could subsidize DC. They could subsidize like sub-segments for woke propaganda, but eventually, like if you're Netflix, eventually you have to bring people into the door, which means making stuff that's less woke. That's a challenge. That's a challenge for them because they really don't think that way. I mean, wasn't there a Viking show? I don't know if it's still in the air, that had a non-Northern European actor, a Sun woman, play the role, the head of the clan. That's where we are now, where you got this, woman from like 10,000 miles away who's a Viking's just a job description. You could totally have Sun women as a leader of a clan. Like, No, you couldn't. And it's insane that you really believe that. Like, I know you don't believe that. Nobody believes that. Um, it's just so odd. Like, we're just at peak of Joker planet. So that's where we are now with Hollywood, where they believe humans are fungible and they will always replace the fair-eyed people with the dark-eyed people. They don't care if it doesn't make money. Their motives are not financial. They're part of a propaganda machine that is brainwashing people. It might sound a little aluminum hat at first, but what do you say when the evidence, there's overwhelming evidence that matches these crazy conspiracy theories, these far right conspiracy theories? Oh, you mean the people who are criticizing Hollywood? That's the far right. Yeah, they're crazy, crazy. I mean, here's the evidence. Would you? Oh, well, okay, you got me there, Bucko. You got me there. Damn you and your evidence. Because to believe otherwise, to think that these are not financial decisions. These are religious. This is a religion to them. Bolshevism is a religion to them. Is to think that these people who are in charge of these billion-dollar companies are making a string of bad woke business decisions repeatedly, and they're expecting different results. And their motive, you think their motive is financial, but they're smart people making bad decisions. And there's a whole string of, like the woke chick flicks that you've seen. Um, I don't know. I name them all. It's like the same dozen movies that, from Ghostbusters 2016 to the Disney Star Wars trilogy, which underperformed, and then solo bombed, and then like Charlie's Angels and Willow and Rings, all the crap. What was a couple other movies the chick flicks that came along? Terminator was a big bomb. The X-Men with the Jennifer Lawrence saying it's going to be X-Women, and people see that and they're like, just nope. And there's a few others that come out. It's like, so they're repeatedly doing this stuff. It's going to be a chick-led film, and I just talked about one the other day that they're coming out with. It's going to be some female reimagining. You go, but those movies have all bombed. Like all these chick-led Birds of Prey, Harley Quinn, that bombed too. And so anytime you look at these people coming out, like, oh, we're going to make another chick-led film, you go, you got a half a dozen bombs in the past 10 years. Why would you want to continue that? The odds are against you. That doesn't seem like a logical business decision, because it's not a business decision. It's a religion. As you know, I'm going to keep saying, it's an ideology for these people. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys all next episode.